Have you found yourself in a battle between what feels like what is your old self and the new self? You know, the one that has a higher vision, the one that has these kind of bold new goals, and you find yourself kind of going back and forth between them or not being able to, what it feels like, sustain this new identity. Well, this is so common, and especially when we're going beyond the places that our conditioning has said is okay to travel to, right? When we have big goals and, they're kind of on the path that everybody expected of us and what we wanted of ourselves from a young age, it's simpler in a way, right? It doesn't mean it's easy. It's just simpler because we're not battling anybody's opinion. We're just doing what is expected. And so then we often just remain focused on those kind of goals and are able to achieve them, or at least stay on that path and keep directing ourselves forward. But when we are creating differently and something brand new and something that we haven't experienced, and perhaps something that no one ever said that we could do or they didn't expect that of us, that's when we have to be alert to what can happen to actually stop us. And that is the old identity. And most often, it's just human nature. People, kind of want each other to remain the same up to an extent, right? They're like, well, I know who you are, and maybe I enjoy these aspects of you, and so please keep doing them. And similarly, a company who's producing a certain product, customers can be, I love this as it is, why are you changing it suddenly, right? And of course, there can be different reasons that we are moving forward. And I'm here to talk specifically about the instances where you are called to it, not just doing it for the sake of doing it or to be different, but you're actually being called to it. And that's when our conditioning can get in the way. Now, conditioning isn't a negative thing by itself. Conditioning is the kind of thing that we intentionally even choose. And so a common example is, when we're young and learning how to tie our shoe the first time, it feels difficult and it feels like such a struggle. We have to put so much attention and focus on that simple act. But at the same time, when we are, we've progressed, we've learned how to do it, like it just becomes part of us. And so it becomes part of our conditioning. We know how to do it. We don't have to think about it. It's absolutely what feels like mindless. The body just goes right into motion, right? It goes right into motion. And that's really important to remember, because that's what our body does the majority of the time. It goes into motion through the pathway we've already created for it, right? So like, this is what I do when I get up, and this is how I work, and this is when I take the breaks, and this is when I interact with my friends and family, and this is when I take my holidays. Like, it's all like predetermined to an extent, right? It can feel that way. And some of that, again, can be really helpful. It brings efficiency. It helps us be really effective. We don't have to think about everything, right? Who wants to think about, make a million more decisions in the day than we already have to, right? So it has this purpose, but we will bump up against it when we are going beyond what can feel like the safety zone of the familiar. When we have bolder goals that perhaps no one in our family or community has created, we're going in a different direction, or just beyond what we thought that we could ever do and would be interested in, we can bump up against that kind of conditioning. And it'll show up in thoughts. It can be thoughts like, why are you doing this? Like, all this constant conflict inside yourself. It can show up as doubt. It can show up as procrastination. And so if we don't understand it and we don't have a way to deal with it, it can literally take months and years of our life that we remain stuck in certain ways because we're just not aware of this kind of information. And I have to say, to some degree, it was new to me until I got much more into coaching. So in the business world and consulting, yes, you can be in situations where you're bringing change, for example, and you're working with people to shift, but it doesn't often go as deep as when you are working one-to-one with somebody, because you really get to see where they're bumping up against. And for myself personally, I also began changing my own goals and the vision I had for myself, realizing that having achieved certain things earlier in my adulthood, I was still excited to create more. But that more was outside my zone of familiarity to an extent. And that's when I started bumping up against that conditioning. And so it came up in thoughts, it came up in feelings, like this old feeling, or the feeling of sudden apathy, like, just no energy to do something. It can come up with, suddenly like everything's taking your attention and you're like, oh, well, I don't have time. And it sounds so reasonable, but there's a bigger story. It can come up as in the body just ends up doing what it always does. And next thing you know, like the day has gone by and you didn't get to that one project that was actually, you said, was on the top of your priorities. And so that's the conditioning kicking in, doing what it always does, and it's going like, hey, why are you trying to take me out of this, right? We're gonna lose efficiency. We're not gonna get everything done, and you're gonna, it's just not gonna work. And so it's like, think of it like a team inside your head that's going like, wait, put on the brakes, right? This person is changing. What's going on? We have to get him back, back doing what she or he was doing. And so there are different, in a way, tricks and tips that we can use to initially have ourselves pause long enough to recognize what's going on and to reprioritize, and then recondition the body according to where it is we are now ready to go. And so instead of living on default, we actually are awake, we feel alive, we feel excited. And I think for me, one of the biggest lessons has been how important it is to be in motion for that change to occur. Be in motion towards that vision that I am seeing, because it's then that I like bump up against the conditioning. If I just, have ideas and I sit down, make an elaborate strategy and plan, it's really easy to spend a lot of time getting stuck in that and think you're progressing and actually be nowhere close other than in your mind. And I've watched people, personally, but also through my work, where they're taking that approach. They are excellent at noting everything down on paper. It's just a skill, and it feels fun. It still feels safe because they haven't taken any action. And yet when the time comes to take action, they freeze or they give up really quickly, because that old conditioning then kicks in. Whereas when you make small steps early on and you're constantly, in motion towards that shift that you're creating, all of a sudden it normalizes within you. And then it's easier, like when you get a little bit of conditioning to deal with that, then, as I said, when you've like created this elaborate plan for months and months, and then suddenly you're like, okay, now I have to do it, and then nothing happens, right? So shifting that identity will make all the difference. I had one client that I worked with who was in a executive level job. It was great in many ways. It was deeply meaningful, the work she was doing as well. But she had this other vision, a way more creative business that she wanted to start. And she found herself delaying the actual leaving of the job and then getting the business started, launching it. She had the ideas. And so that's actually when she hired me. And so I could see that fairly quickly. And in her case, there were immediate action steps with a timeline that we initiated to make sure that she would progress into starting, because that's all it was. It was that she was just stuck in thoughts of fear and doubt and procrastination. And also, what will others think of me? So that desiring of approval. And so by setting the clear deadlines, and she was feeling more accountable to herself because she was working with me. And so she was able to then leave that job and launch the business in a very short span of time compared to the couple of years she'd been planning it. And when she did, like, everything just started happening, right? Then she, like, the new identity just showed up because now she was in the business, right? So when we push certain pieces away, like the place that we're going to show up, that's when we basically end up kind of sabotaging ourselves. At the same time as the action, there is another piece that I have, really learned and practiced in the last several years that's also been quite enlightening, and that is relaxing and being with the energy or the emotions that seem to be getting in the way. So instead of like always being in action to push through and feel the fear and do it anyway, there are places when if the nervous system really gets scared, it won't even be able to have you think of the things that in one sense that need to be done, right? You'll be so close that even the ideas and opportunities right in front of you will remain hidden. And so in that, I take time every day to just pause and relax. And sometimes that's the physical way, as in to meditate or just pause and slow my breath down and just feel good emotions, because you can access good emotions at any time, but just thinking of them, right? And for me, that's probably one of my most powerful ways that I create a shift within myself. And then when I do that, it just feels so easy, right? And another part is to bring myself into more coherence, both internally through that breath work and that calming, but also into coherence by sometimes writing down what's coming up for me so that I can just let it go and I don't have to have it take up space in my brain. And by doing that, it kind of releases the old self's thoughts and what it wants to do. Like, I'll note it down and then I'll say, hey, here's what would I really love? And then the new self seems to speak up quite instantly. It's because they're both there. And so the more attention I give to the new self and then take actions accordingly, the faster the new identity just feels like, oh, like I've been this all along. And that's what that client that I worked with who launched her business, we worked together for literally a couple of months. And by the end of it, she goes, I just don't even remember that other energy and why it was even stuck. Because when it happens, it's usually, as I said, it's a default thing that happens in the body and the nervous system and the mind. And it's like falling asleep, becoming unconscious instead of being awake to what we are really intending and where we want to direct our will and our energy and our, physical choices. So then, like, that new identity just felt so normal to her, like she'd been doing it for years. And on top of that, even people around her were saying, wow, like, you fit this so well. It's hard to imagine you weren't even doing it before. So that's how quick the shift can happen when it's done consciously. And then how, like, she just leapt into that business and she started experiencing success, day one, literally when the doors opened. So that was really wonderful to be a part of and to witness alongside her. And so I want you to just be alert to this. If you are finding that you're like, you have all the right intentions, but for some reason you're not moving. Maybe this is what's going on. The old self is trying to hang on. It wants to, like, just remain. It's like fighting for its existence. Whereas a new self is like ready and open, and it knows what to do and when to do it, and it will have the energy because it's connected and it's aligned with that vision naturally, right? So relax. Give yourself time every day to just, let go of the thoughts, let go of the feelings, and tap into the reservoir of joy and of energy and of whatever elevated emotions really connect with you. Maybe, the sense of richness, happiness, ease. There's so many beautiful things that we can tap into awe, beauty, fun, play, right? And these energies are very active, and these are things that we all know inside of us innately. And once we tap into them, we can move forward really quickly. Let me see if there's any other things in my notes. So I've used the words here of the old self and the new self, but something that I hear a lot of people using is the future self. What will your future self do? Personally, I don't find that helpful, because as soon as I use the word future, it puts it out there, and then suddenly I have to get out of myself and go to my future and then bring, it creates the gap. So that's why I say new self, or a new identity, or a new part of me, right? Things that don't feel like, oh my God, there's this big divide between where I am and where I want to be. And because in fact the so-called future self is current, otherwise you couldn't think of it. It wouldn't be coming up. You wouldn't have ideas of it, right? So it's not in the future, it's in the current. Now, all the material experiences of it may not be current right now, but the energy and the identity can be. And it's only by moving into that we end up creating the material results and the shifts as well. So if that helps, use that languaging instead, right? Because sometimes a little tweak in a word can help us align. And this is really important, especially I find I've had experiences where I use a word and a client goes, oh, they just have a resistance to it, and they want to shut down. And it's so interesting, because all they have to do is change the word, right? Because once I hear that, if they're open, then we can look at it. What is a word that actually has you get closer to that higher vision instead of creating separation, right? And sometimes just a shift in the word can just open doors really quickly. Another thing you can do is invite in, if you're very sensitive energetically, you can, when you're kind of relaxing, you can invite in the energy of the new self. And for me, that's really effective. Even as I'm talking to you right now, I can feel it, and I said, just using the hands to go invite it in, suddenly it does feel oh, there's an energy moving in, my new self, my true self, my higher self, the one that actually already has what it takes to create this vision, that's already living it, And so I can bring that energy, once I've tapped into it, to any activity I do. And you can do it with fun things at home, just, again, as I said, washing the dishes, and just feel yourself in that new energy. You can walk down the street in this new energy, the new self. What is she or he feeling and thinking? I try to stay personally away from what is she or thinking, because again, that it's I have to change my thoughts, and that for me gets me into my thoughts. So if it works for you, awesome. But if it doesn't, then I find, again, energetically, if I'm receiving that new self and then I radiate that out and make new choices according to that. Okay, I already have this, so what would I be doing right now, right? What new things would I be doing today as this new self? And then that's really immediate, and then I can put it in relationship to an actual action, and even if it's a tiny action, it will kind of bring me more energy by taking it. And if I can take more action, then awesome, right? It'll just empower that and keep it going to the point where the old identity is just the past, and the past doesn't exist anymore. We're in the now, right? So acting more in this kind of power is going to bring a beautiful energy forward, so that you're not struggling with the battle of having to go back and forth. And I've asked, when I worked with people, I've asked many times, I feel this so strongly, the new self, but then I find myself coming back. What do I do? And a lot of people just didn't have any answers for me, or they were like, well, do you just do it? Or putting me in the head and what I have to think about, and writing lists and all of this stuff. What would my old self do? What would my new self do? And again, for me, if I go into the mind, I get into overanalysis, and that is a great way to sabotage progress. So staying out of there and being much more either energetic and then practical in terms of actions, I find just goes a long way. And I've used that approach with so many clients, and it's amazing how quickly the new identity just takes shape. And sometimes like the results start showing up even before the person has recognized her in that new identity fully, right? So we don't have to use this wording, but we can choose actions which are making it happen. So don't fret if you're finding that battle, but maybe listen to this video again and then put it into practice like right after, so that you get an experience of it, so it's actually real for you. And then, and of course you're going to adjust it according to you. These are general videos. This is not personal guidance for any one particular person. I can only do that one-on-one when I'm working with someone. So if you're interested in that, you can click the link below and book a session with me or a few, and play with this, like create with it. Like, what is that new self? I've asked people this sometimes, just, like they're like, oh, well, once I have this part of my business is running and this part has happened and then I have this much money, then I'll be able to do, X, Y, and Z. And, often I've asked, okay, imagine you already have it right now. You already have that. What is your next step? And then like they light up, their whole body shifts energy. They become alive, and they're almost physically like in motion, ready to do the next thing. And then their mind's going, well, wait a second, you're not there yet, right? But notice that shift happens in the body, and that is fantastic. So then you can invite the mind to come up with thoughts on what will support you, right? Okay, so I'm not there, but I can do this right now. And then take that into action and into your life. So practice it. Put in the comments how you experienced it after you applied it. And I will be more than happy to bring in more videos, because this is actually a pretty big topic. So I'm trying to bring it to you in a small way so that you can at least start activating it today. So thanks for listening, and do subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.